Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Insiders of Wall Street. Today, I don't have an insider. I have an outsider, but a smart one at that. And that's Lindsay from Pittsburgh. We're going to talk to her about her adventures of Bitcoin and many other things, and how she is working towards her own financial freedom. And Lindsay, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Sergio. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So I found Lindsay on X. Actually, I found some good people on X, unlike some others. But and I DM'd her, and she was gracious enough to accept my invitation to talk to her for about 20, 30 minutes. So Lindsay is doing something very interesting. Lindsay is actually she puts out videos called Uber Chronicles. Now, folks, there's many. I drive Uber as well, by the way. So. Um, Not for money, but for fun. But Lindsay is doing it for a different reason. But then we'll talk about that. And you can find her YouTube channel and X handle in the show notes. Please go check her out. So, Lindsay, I see most of your tweets, well, basically all of your tweets is about Bitcoin, right? Tell us your relationship with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. I'll give you a little bit of backstory, and then we can kind of take it from there, whatever questions that you have. I got into investing 10 years ago, whenever I got my first corporate job or first 9 to 5, W-2, whatever you want to call it, after college. And I also, I was always just interested in personal finance and financial freedom. And so for me, it was a big part of that was the first job that I had out of college. I really didn't enjoy. And I didn't like going to it every day. And I every day was thinking to myself, like, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to escape
Welcome
this?
to the real world.
Exactly. It was alarming. And so, I started doing research and reading books and figuring out that you have to own assets. You have to own stocks, real estate, at that time, bonds. Bitcoin was not part of this 10 years ago whatsoever. But it was, or own businesses or, whatever you decide. There's tons of good assets that you can own. And I started initially in the stock market, just, maxing out my Roth IRA, putting money into my 401k, getting my company match. I started a taxable brokerage account. I was pretty much just, I started off investing in individual stocks. I realized I was horrible at it, had no idea what I was doing, picking the wrong ones, and then just pivoted to
Yeah.
ETFs, index funds and ETFs, and just, DCA'd into index funds, and then branched out, got into owning single family rentals, real estate, had a few properties, still have a couple. And then I, started on social media posting about personal finance, making content. Just my message really in the beginning a few years ago was just you can build wealth by working a 9 to 5 and investing in quality assets over the long term. That was really my main message. And met people in the Bitcoin space who introduced me to Bitcoin and just said, hey, you should look into this asset. You should read about it, do your own research, things of that nature. And so initially I was just interested in it, nothing more, nothing less. Just what is this thing? This is cool. And a lot of really smart people are buying it. What is it that they know about it that I don't know about it? Basically, same journey as me starting in personal finance. So reading, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, things like that. Read everything I could possibly read and basically came to the conclusion that Bitcoin was for me. And so I think I have a great relationship with Bitcoin now because I feel like I'm starting to understand it. This has been a multi-year journey. I still feel like I have so much to learn. I still feel like there's so many people on the internet that know way more about it, Bitcoin the asset and Bitcoin the network, know way more than I do. But I really like it. And, I think when you this is how I like to frame it. This is my explanation is most people, majority of people know that inflation is a real thing. They know that the Fed is printing money. They know that the value of our dollars are decreasing. And they know that they're either making the same amount of money they were a couple of years ago or maybe a little bit more money, but they know that everything that they're buying has become more expensive. Most people have been able to come to that conclusion. And so then the question is, what do I do about it? When you go through this thought process, you realize that the answer to that is to own assets. You have to own things that are going up in value as more money is printed. And if you don't own assets, then you are constantly getting poorer and the wealth gap is widening. So then you come to that conclusion, okay, inflation's a real thing. I got that. I have to own assets. Okay, I got that. And then the question becomes which asset? And that is where Bitcoin comes into play, because you can say, I think the stock market is the best asset, or I think real estate is the best asset, or I think Bitcoin is the best asset. And then you start asking yourself the pros and cons of each of those things. And for me, the easiest conclusion to come to was that Bitcoin's pros far outweighed its cons, and that its pros were more beneficial than the pros of the others, in my personal opinion. And that's where I put my money.
Okay. You're preaching to the choir, by the way. So for all of you who are watching this with Lindsay and myself, please go subscribe to my channel. It's small. I just started it, but it's growing. I agree with 100% of what Lindsay just said. I have a good friend who's told me this a while ago, and he said, don't slave harder, save in hard assets. You know what I'm saying? So now there are many hard assets. And what Lindsay talked about, debasing of the currency, devaluation of the currency, gaslighting to the max by our government, because they do gaslight you folks. One thing I'm going to disagree with Lindsay is that most people, she said, they know about this. 90% of the people don't know about this, because 90% of the people, Lindsay, are happy getting an iPhone on 3-year payments every 3 years, getting an 80-inch TV and a 6-pack of beer watching the Super Bowl. Most people don't know anything about this, and I don't want to insult anyone, okay? That's reality. Financial literacy in this country is horrible. We teach our kids everything in elementary school, at middle school. We teach them about, all kinds of things, as we know, but we don't talk about finance. We don't talk about financial freedom, and it goes all the way to college, because most kids graduate with $200,000 of debt out of college. So I'm on a journey, Lindsay. Maybe you'll join me on the journey. Financial literacy is the key, and I think it's done on purpose, and they're not doing it. But everything else you said about Bitcoin, about hard assets, I agree. Let's look at hard assets. Gold just hit 4,400. Bitcoin is hovering at all-time highs. Stock market, 1% from all-time highs. Real estate, there's probably a correction, but still over the last 5-6 years, and you're 100% correct, by the way, paychecks have not kept pace with inflation. And government gaslighting goes, oh, inflation is 2.5%. My butt, what 2.5%? This year alone, Lindsay, the dollar has lost 10% of its value against a basket of currencies. Your money just lost 10% of its value. Nominally, $100 is still the same $100 that you look at. It says 100 on it from 5 years ago. It ain't going to buy the same amount of goods. So Bitcoin. So give me a little bit, because you decided Bitcoin is for you, right? I think any hard asset, if you DCA into ETFs and you don't have time to pay attention to as deeply as you did on Bitcoin or other assets, stock market DCAing over long periods of time, passive investing will get you there without a question. But then there are other assets that will outperform, like Bitcoin. But why specifically Bitcoin? Like, what really turned you on to Bitcoin? Is it this finite quality? Is it that they don't, like, unlike the dollars, they don't make it anymore? There's only 21 million we know of, and about 19 million are spoken for. What is it like, other than obviously the safety and security as well, because it hasn't been hacked yet? So, well, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. So a couple of things that you said there that I want to comment on. I think when I say most people, realize this, I don't think most people know about money. I think most people see that they're making the same amount of money as they were before, or slightly more, but everything around them is getting more expensive. If you talk to people in the real world, they're like, the groceries, vacation costs. Oh my gosh, my rent went up, my mortgage, these insurance, or these insurance costs, my property taxes, these used cars, they're so expensive these days. Everything, daycare, people can't afford to have kids because daycare costs are through the roof. And it used to be that you could raise a family on a single income household, and then you needed 2-income household, and then now you need 2-income household and a side hustle, and you used to be able to have 4 kids, and now people can have 1 kid, maybe 2 kids. Or you used to be able to retire when you were 60, and now you might have to work till you're 65 or till you're 70, because everything around you is getting more expensive, but the things aren't, your wages aren't keeping up with it, and the assets, if you don't own assets, you're not keeping up. And so another thing I want to say is, like, like you said about the $100 bill, this is why I think people don't understand it. They put, let's just use round numbers, for example. They put $1,000 in their savings account. And today is, I don't even know what day it is. Today is October 18th. They put $1,000 in their savings account today, and October 18th, 2026 still says $1,000. So
Yep.
they don't think that they've lost any money. They don't
Right.
understand that there's a difference between the price of things going up and your purchasing power. Purchasing power is what people want. Numbers on a screen going up is not what people ultimately want. They think that's what they want. They think I need $1 million and I'll be free, or I need $2 million and I'll be free. That's not the case, because what $1 million buys you today versus what $1 million bought you 5 years ago are two completely different things. What people are after is purchasing power. They want to preserve and grow their purchasing power. And so then when you ask why Bitcoin, a couple of things. If you don't own any assets, you're getting poorer every single year. If you own the S&P 500, in my opinion, you're keeping pace with inflation. The real inflation rate, in my opinion, is what the S&P 500 returns. So there's three buckets of people. There's people that don't invest at all. They're constantly getting poorer. It's going to be very hard to outrun that situation. You have people who invest just strictly in index funds. They're not getting any poorer, which is a great step. They're also potentially not increasing their purchasing power. They're keeping pace with inflation. Their money, the number on the screen is going up proportionately with how much money is in circulation, and they're not actually getting richer or getting wealthier or increasing their purchasing power. They're staying the same. With Bitcoin, the compound annual growth rate from its inception has been such that you've been able to not only keep pace with inflation, but you've been able to increase your purchasing power because the returns on a yearly basis have far outrun the returns of most other assets other than some individual stocks. We can say Nvidia has ran, whatever, or Meta has ran whatever. So the biggest eye-opening piece for me was when I started pricing assets in Bitcoin instead of pricing them in dollars. So you can do three things. You can price your assets in dollars, you can price your assets in gold, and you can price your assets in Bitcoin. And what you will see is that when you price the S&P 500 in Bitcoin, it's not growing. It's going up in value because more money is being printed and more money is going into it, but it's not growing in Bitcoin terms. And I think when you start to see those things, and it's not growing in gold terms either, and gold is a hard money, and I think gold and Bitcoin are things that people like to compare the most. You start to see that, the reason your assets, the reason your house is worth 200,000 more than it was 5 years ago is not because that house got more valuable. It's because more money has been put into circulation, and thus things around you have become more expensive. And I think that's a very important distinction. And why I gravitate towards Bitcoin, because like you said, there's a finite supply. It's decentralized. It is peer-to-peer. I don't need anyone's permission to access my Bitcoin. I don't hold it at a bank. I hold it on a hardware device in my house. You can't create more of it when the price goes up, which is something that you do with gold. And what we're seeing right now, the price of gold is through the roof. And people are trying to mine gold as quickly as humanly possible because it's very, very valuable right now. So they're going to go mine a bunch of it, put more in circulation, which ultimately decreases the price. You can put more real estate. You can put up more houses. You can create as many shares of Nvidia as you want, of Apple as you want, billions of shares. The share count has increased exponentially over the last 10 years of these companies. And there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and those Bitcoin are locked in time. Yep. You cannot increase the supply of those things at any rate that you or I want to, because it is locked in time. So that makes it hard money. It makes it the hardest money ever created. And when you look into the history of money and you see that every single fiat currency that's ever been in existence has all failed at one point or another because of hyperinflation, because of money printing, you start to see the value in a money that can't be debased. And that's what leads you to Bitcoin.
Okay, well, those are all compelling arguments, and I agree with you because I purchased my first Bitcoin in 2020, didn't do anything with it, but then now I saw with the new administration, obviously, more friendly to crypto in general, and obviously I do listen to Michael Saylor. I'm not sure I'm agreeing with 100% of what he's doing with his company, but I saw that Bitcoin was, to me, was like almost like an inflation hedge, let's say. And it's the best hedge out there, except gold has done obviously really well. And but having 30 years of experience in all asset classes, I do agree with you that for me the most attractive part of Bitcoin was the finite um, numbers that it's out there. Now, until tomorrow, somebody comes and says, "Oh, I just created another 21 million Bitcoin." It's a different story, but we know most likely that's not going to happen. And there is no other finite asset that I can attach my fiat currency to, which is toilet paper. Anyway, I mean, I call the U.S. a much bigger version of Greece with a printing machine. Honestly, that's where we are. So to me, you're right with everything you're saying, and you got attracted to it. Although with I'm seeing certain things in the Bitcoin market, and I DCA every Monday, by the way, like clockwork. I don't care if it's 125,000, 105,000, whatever it is. And I started doing that this year, started this year, after 5 years of not buying it, originally buying it. When did you buy your first Bitcoin, by the way?
So I started like researching I mean, I messed around with Bitcoin in 2018, meaning I bought it, made a few $100, sold it, just selling and buying and selling. Didn't know anything about it though. I started heavily researching Bitcoin at the end of 2023, bought Bitcoin for the first time in February 2024, and have been pretty much all about it for the last
Okay.
almost 2 years.
Do you DCA? Do you like
Yes.
okay. Who do you use, River, or who do you use to DCA?
River. Yep.
River? Okay. And do you obviously you take it out of, put it in your cold wallet, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, don't give him custody of your Bitcoin. Uh, so okay, fairly new to Bitcoin, right?
Hmm.
Now there are a couple of things I'm saying. By the way, do you like any other cryptos like ETH and Solana, and you don't like it? So
Nope.
what do you think about, quickly? What do you think about what Michael Saylor is doing, Thomas Lee is doing, Tom Lee is doing, Solana Network, all these DATs, as they call it, digital asset treasury companies? Because I'm trading quite actively, a bunch of them. And I think there's a misconception in the community finance, especially on X. It's like ooh,
Yeah.
people throw these chopsticks on, like, oh, look at BMNR, it's going to do this. I'm like, bro, BMNR is not going to go anywhere unless Ethereum goes somewhere, or MicroStrategy or Strategy is not going to go anywhere unless BTC does something. But that's a different topic. So you don't
Yep.
dabble in anything, any other shitcoin, any other altcoin, because we know what happened last Friday, right?
Yeah.
That's the other
No.
thing I wanted to ask you. Do you have any remorse about people buying fart coin on 50x leverage and losing everything they had in half an hour? Because I have zero remorse.
Oh, no.
No.
I doesn't bother me whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think people work way too hard for their money to gamble it on things like that, but to each their own.
To each their
But
own.
no,
Yeah.
I don't own any. I don't own any altcoins or anything like that. And I think it really comes down to this very simple premise that if we don't like fiat currency because this entity, the government or the Fed, prints more of it whenever they want, and I have to go to work every day to earn the same money that they print more of whenever they want. If I don't like that premise and I'm gravitating towards Bitcoin because that's not the case with Bitcoin, why would I buy some crypto coin, altcoin that doesn't have a fixed supply, that a board of directors can issue more of whenever they want, where a board of directors owns a vast majority of the coins in supply or in circulation or can manipulate the price? Like that, essentially, when you buy those types of things, I think it's the same thing as dabbling in fiat currency or thinking that fiat is the way,
Yeah.
essentially.
Fiat's not the way, for sure. And what you
Yeah.
said previously, like when we started, you said the wealth gap, right? The wealth gap is real, folks. And it's the widest it's ever been, ever.
And getting
Now
wider.
that's why I disagreed with you when you said, most people know, most people don't know. That's why the wealth gap is so wide, because the rich have figured this out. I've been saying this in private circles for a long time and on my channel for like a year now. The rich have figured this out a long time ago. The interest rates were ZERP, right? Zero interest rate policy for 15 years, since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And they just borrowed money and bought hard assets. You
Yep.
borrow at 1% and you buy a hard asset, and then the poor people, not poor, but they don't know, they don't have the education, they're not taught like yourself. They go buy stuff to make
Yeah.
themselves feel
They
good. Like that's why
yeah.
our economy is 75% GDP is what? Consumer spending. They go buy stuff and get the endorphins going. I feel good. What I want to do is I want to teach people, you can buy stuff, you can buy assets. let that be your endorphin rush, as opposed to, and see that account grow and outpace inflation versus, I don't know, you go buy some useless garbage on Amazon or whatever. But okay, so I use Bitcoin. Is it for you long term, right? You're hodling. You're not gonna sell it. You're not gonna trade it, because in my opinion is Bitcoin should not be traded. You're just gonna
Nope.
buy it and hold it.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
What else you're dabbling in? Are you doing anything else? Because I see you, dabbling in a little bit of, cash secured
Yeah.
puts and things like that. So,
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I have a 401k
okay.
that, I've been putting money into up to the match for, the last 10 years. And there's a lot of discourse on X about 401ks being a scam. And if you believe in Bitcoin, why put money into your 401k and things like that. And that's not what I want to get into today. But I will say that I have retirement accounts. I have my 401k. I still have a Roth IRA. My Roth IRA, I've pretty much switched over into IBIT. So it
Okay.
mostly has exposure to Bitcoin.
Okay.
I don't believe that paper Bitcoin is the same thing as Bitcoin and cold storage. So I don't consider that to be the same thing. But I do think that it allows you exposure to the Bitcoin price movement and the number go up technology, which is what people are into. I have reserved a small amount of money in my Roth IRA to trade options, not buying options, but selling options.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recommend this. Like I I would not, go on a podcast or post on my social media that people should be selling options. I'm doing it because it's a skill set that I've personally been interested in learning. I've seen it and I want to figure it out for myself. If I do this experiment where I have this small amount of money to the side that I'm selling options on and it doesn't work out in my favor, that's perfectly fine. And I can live with the fact that I lose money doing this and it was fun. I learned it. I learned it wasn't for me. Cool. Or maybe I find out that I really enjoy it. It is a way that I can make money on the side to funnel into IBIT,
Yep.
and, kind of do it that way. But yeah, I'm in the very beginning stages of doing that. I've only been selling options for a couple of months. I'm already, I just took an L selling options this past Friday. I sold a cash secured put. The market dumped, the last few days of this past week, and I got assigned shares above the price of the stock is currently. So
Yeah.
this is not like this
Well,
like
it's not
easy
foolproof.
foolproof way to no exactly yeah.
No.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I do that. And other than that, though, I have rental real estate that I'm in the process of selling. Actually, I sold one of my properties in March of this year, put the money into Bitcoin. I'm getting ready to list one of my other properties. Gonna put the money into Bitcoin. And other than that, I just own Bitcoin in cold storage.
Okay. Well, I agree with everything you're saying, but I'm glad you woke up to the realization that only like a 2% down, down leg on the market will create havoc if you're short options. Okay. And the
Yep.
same thing if you short calls, it's going to create havoc on the upside if it's company, because there's unlimited risk in these things. But there's ex-furus that go like, oh, I'm selling options every month, and then selling options is not going to get you anywhere. Like, and it'll get you a couple of percent here and there, a month or two or whatever. You can get maybe 25, 30, but the risks are not spoken enough. And
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, like, you just got assigned, and then your cost basis is higher than what it is. And
Yep.
but what happens is that, Lindsay, people don't have history, education of history on their side. What happened in 2000? I'm not saying it's the same thing. What happened in 2008? What happened during the pandemic? If you were short puts, you got assigned everything, and now you're just hoping the market to save your ass. And you know what? Last 3
Exactly.
years, that has happened. Selling puts is great when in a bull market because everything goes up and then they expire worthless. You sell it again, you sell it again. I call selling put selling calls more like picking up pennies in front of the bulldozer. I'm like, no, I'm
I get that.
directional. If I do like a stock, I'm just going to buy the stock and hold the damn thing. Because you could have
I
sold
get
so
that.
many calls on Nvidia or Palantir and you would have watched the train go by and they take your stock away and it's gone up another 10x. But be careful with options. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Well, so to finish, we have a couple of minutes here. I see Bitcoin. I said this on my channel multiple times, and we kind of agree, I think, on this. Is that I watch something called M2 very closely. M2 is the money supply.
Mike's car.
There is US M2 and there's global M2. Okay.
Yep.
If you look at the correlation between the Bitcoin price and we're talking Bitcoin, but you can look at all asset classes actually. The only reason these assets are going up is because more money is coming into circulation. And if you look at M2 in the US, as of yesterday, it just made a new high. Okay. Global M2, the same thing. China is stimulating, pumping. And I mean, the whole world is pumping because I do believe we're in this musical chairs kind of a world with this money pump printing, right? And at some point, it's going to end horribly badly. But I'm not smart enough to figure any of that out. My timing, it's not about timing. So when this M2 keeps growing, and then if you can actually superimpose the Bitcoin chart on top of a M2, you see what's
It's
happening.
correlated.
You correlate it. And there's a little bit of a delay. Actually, it has separated quite a bit now. Well, we know what's going to happen here. M2 actually, and the gap between M2 and Bitcoin, by the way, has not been this wide for a long time. So either Bitcoin is going to catch up to that, or M2 is going to come down. I'm betting Bitcoin catches up to it because M2 is never going to come down.
Exactly.
Okay,
I feel
so
the
we
exact
agree
same
on the
way.
correlation as well. Okay.
Yes.
So Bitcoin is it for you? You've been doing it for a year and a half, let's say. But like, do you have an automatic DCA, or do you how do you do it?
Yeah, my strategy is fairly straightforward, I think. I DCA every single day, 8:05 a.m. every single
Every
morning.
day?
I buy Bitcoin. Yes, every single
Oh
day.
my God. Okay, I want to
And
hear this one.
yeah, but so I also make money on the side. We've talked about this briefly. I have a W-2 job. So
Yeah.
I know exactly how much money I'm bringing in every single month from that. And that's what my DCA is based off of. I know how much I can buy on a daily basis every month because of my W-2 income.
Okay.
I also make money on rental properties. Rent comes in. Sometimes I have expenses for the rental properties. That the net profit of those things is unknown, because if something breaks, something goes wrong, an issue with the tenant, I don't get rent on time, whatever the case is, that is a variable income. I also drive Uber on the side, so that's a variable income. So what I do is I DCA daily based off of my W-2 income, and then I smash by every time extra money hits my account from other sources of income. So whenever I get rent and I have, profit from rent, I smash buy Bitcoin. And whenever I drive Uber, I smash buy Bitcoin. So yes, I have a DCA, but I also buy every single time dollars hit my checking account.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So I want a couple of minutes remaining. I'm going to give you the floor. We'll talk about, I mean, you have chosen your path to financial freedom. It's BTC, obviously.
Yep.
But then, we'll see. We'll see how it's going to be. Do you ever think of the downside at all?
Of
If
course.
there is a downside of Bitcoin?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm extremely bullish on Bitcoin. I think it's going to remonetize everything. I think
Okay.
people that own rental real estate are going to see that there's a lot of headaches in rental real estate. And the reason people were buying rental real estate was because they wanted to store their value somewhere. They
Yep.
earn money and they know that they can't hold it in dollars because dollars are going down in value. So they know they
Yep.
have to put it somewhere. So they look around and say, where am I going to put this? Maybe I'll put it in this single family home. They're historically going up in value. The value of the home is going to be greater in the future. Maybe I can cash flow, increase, have some cash flow, have some depreciation, help my taxes.
Yep.
So they decide to store their money in rental real estate. And then they realize that property taxes are constantly going up and insurance is constantly going up. And they have to constantly increase rent to keep pace with those things. And they're increasing rent on people who don't own assets and who have struggled to pay an increase in rent. And your toilet, overflows and the roof breaks and you have maintenance and you have all these costs and headaches. And you then start to see that Bitcoin has been the best performing asset for the last 16 years and you've had none of those headaches attached. The headaches come from the courage that it takes to hold in the down market, the courage that
Yep.
it takes when it sells off from 125,000 to 100,000 in 3 days. And that takes courage that a lot of people don't have. A lot of people aren't willing to stomach those things. And so there is downside risks. I mean, anybody who buys Bitcoin knows that historically it's operated in a 4-year cycle. And the 4-year cycle says that 2026 is going to be a bear market. Last bear market, we hit an all-time high of 69,000 and went down to 15,000. So that's about 75%, 80% drop. If that were to happen from the all-time high that we just had at 125,000, that takes us down to 37,000, 37,500, down to 35. Most people aren't willing to see 80% of their net worth drop in the matter of a year. There are risks associated as far as, people say that quantum computing is a risk. I don't necessarily think that that's as big of a risk as other people think it is. There's a lot of discussion about core versus knots. There's a lot of discussion on the internet about, another coin coming in and overtaking Bitcoin. And again, I don't think that that's a risk. I don't personally perceive that as a risk because there's millions of cryptocurrencies in play and none of them have been able to do what Bitcoin's able to do from an asset or network perspective. I think that good investors and smart people in general, they look into the downside risk first before the upside risk. If you only ever focus on the upside and you never consider the downside, you're in for a rude awakening when the downside comes. And so I think it is very smart to be realistic and know that the thing that I'm buying could drop 80%. Am I willing to go through the ebbs and the flows of this asset? For me personally, I am, because I think that the outsized returns are worth the short-term drops or the sideways action. And this is something that's personally kind of been that I have been wanting to talk about on social media, and I probably will very soon, is that people want things to happen overnight. And a lot of people buy Bitcoin and think that this is their ticket to financial freedom and it's going to $1 million next month and they're going to be rich and quit their job. That is not reality. These crazy price targets that people give on the internet most times are for clickbait, that they're not real. And you need to be realistic. And for me, when I look at Bitcoin and I see that we're at 106,000 right now, and we were at 112,000 last December 24, we've essentially traded sideways for a year. To me, that is the best opportunity that could be provided to any young person right now, because had Bitcoin hit 112,000 last December and rocketed to 250,000, went to 500,000, went to $1 million, if you have a little stack, that run to $1 million doesn't change your financial future all that much because you don't have enough money into it. It going sideways down, up a little, sideways down for years on end is allowing myself and other young people to buy more, to increase our stack, to increase our exposure, so that when the time comes that this asset runs to these prices that we know are going to happen because money will continue to be printed and this finite asset will absorb that, then when that occurs, we will have a different financial situation and a different financial picture because we will have had time to get, more money into it. So for me, I just look at this as the best opportunity available right now. And I look at it as a gift that I've been able to stack sats at this current price around 100,000 for as long as I have, because I fully believe that we're going much higher. And I want other people to kind of look at it as a blessing instead of a complaint that we should have been at 200,000 by now.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you're 100% correct that a lot of people, I think it's due to social media too, that they have become very short-term oriented. Rome wasn't built in a day. I've been at this for 30 plus years. Okay. I've seen it all, and longevity, consistency is the key. You're not YOLOing into some zero DTE options, and then making 300,000 on the next trade, you get blown up by a $500,000 loss. But unfortunately, that's where society is these days, right? Very short-term oriented, and 100% agree. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon with any asset class. But make sure it's outperforming inflation, and make sure it's outperforming your loss of value in your fiat currency. But yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you're saying. We're definitely going to keep in touch. So subscribe to her channel, please. She has a YouTube channel the links are in the show notes, her Twitter handle as well. And if you're interested in this type of content, I would love to interview you if you have like ideas about, cash secure puts, wheeling, and things like that. I have my opinions about these things that I've come to experience. I'm not sure it's what it's cut out to be, but you very rarely run into a young lady, and I'm going to call you a young lady. You are with this much convincing commitment that she has to something that is very rare in what generation are you, by the way? Are you Gen Z?
I'm a millennial.
Oh, yeah, okay. I have two kids. One is third year in college, one is in high school. I teach them everything, obviously, that I can about finance, because but I want to, I wish there were so many more Lindsays out there, because this is the way to do it, folks. You are in charge of your financial freedom. Don't worry about flipping TikTok for like 4 hours a day. Go learn about something. Go educate yourself, because government's not coming for you unless you have rich parents. And it's rare. Nobody's coming for you. You're you. You got to take care of yourself. And that's why I did the YouTube channel. That's why I did the website. And I'll collaborate with Lindsay anytime she wants. And but I'm glad I've come to know you, and we'll keep in touch. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Appreciate you.